So this is a review for Porky's Road Race, released in 1937. It's the 156th in the series, and it's directed by Frank Tashlin. You can find this on the Looney Tunes Gone Collection Volume 3 DVD set, and on the Porky Pig 101 DVD set, fully uncut, as there is one little problematic scene which I'll get to very soon. In case you haven't seen this one, I can't show you the full thing here due to copyright on YouTube. The video will just get blocked if I try to, But essentially, there's a road race, and it's basically an excuse to put a lot of celebrities of the time, of which I will certainly get into in this review, so you guys know who they are. And yeah, we just get road race with, in the end, it's Porky versus Frankenstein's monster, apparently. So yeah, there you are. Now, I'm not going to put in a re-edit of the original audio commentary this time because I was listening to that track and it was just me basically explaining who these people are, but very briefly, nothing substantial, and I didn't really offer much in that track, so I thought I'd start fresh. But before we get into my thoughts on the short and also all of the references here, I thought we'd start off with my good friend Austin Kelly. He's a self-proclaimed Tashlin-holic. He's going to be doing recordings for every single Frank Tashlin short. I mean, there's not many, but hey, they're still pretty good. So yeah, he's done it for the first few, so now here he is for Porky's Road Race. So take it away, Austin.
Hey everybody, Austin Kelly here again to talk again about Frank Tashlin again in one of his lesser known cartoons, Porky's Road Race from 1937. This is an interesting one because the hottest topic these days has been, Frank Tashlin is a big cinema guy and he's doing these dramatic thrillers or horror takes, and it's all really fun and good. But now we've come to an early Tashlin that is really just a gag film. Well, it's got a good story and a solid set of stakes, but it's not as serious in tone or whatever as the first bunch of his cartoons were. Clearly, though, Tashlin is still thinking in terms of film and Hollywood, which of course is where his mind was. It was in the Hollywood mindset of making live-action features when he was making cartoons, because this is an entire cartoon full of Hollywood caricatures and riffs on those movie stars of the day. He, of course, the Warner Brothers caricature guy, is the one who designed the celebrities in this cartoon, as he did for the Cuckoo Nut Grove by Freeling, and the later Tashlin cartoon, Woods Are Full of Cuckoos, from the same year, which we'll get to down the road. But it's interesting as well to see, again, Carl Stalling's score, which is really well done, but as we've been talking about, Stalling's early scores uses mostly just popular songs without any original bridges or whatever, which is interesting because there's a larger emphasis put, especially in things like the Carl Stalling Project, and just scholars talking about Stalling, all these praises about how good of a composer he was, and the music that he made for the cartoons, when in reality he owes a lot of it to the popular music, and of course no one's denying that. Stalling was, in these days especially, really just taking a bunch of Warner Brothers library songs and just using those without, as opposed to in the 50s later on, or in the 40s even, a lot of the soundtrack would be original compositions, or Stalling had composed some things back when he didn't have music libraries to work off of when he was working on, the Ub Iwerks cartoons or whatever else. So it's interesting to see that score in action, which is essentially just pop music and not much else. And in the same way, I suppose, it's interesting to see a Frank Tashlin cartoon that is mostly just gags and not a lot of stakes or story or whatever. But that's not to say there's not a lot to like about it, because of course there is potential still to show that influence of the Hollywood films. There are some dramatic angles and shots, and that's all good fun for Tashlin. Just routine, expected in any cartoon he does, of varying quality, even though they're all good at least, and I don't think any of them are terrible. But Porky's Road Race, pretty good cartoon. Not a ton to say about it, but there's always something to enjoy about any film that has the name Frank Tashlin on it. So until next time, hopefully something that's got a little more something to it that we can discuss in detail. So we'll see what comes up.
But thank you, Austin. So, well, there actually is quite a bit in this one, but a lot of it is really to do with the references. I do agree, there's not really much to the story in this one. It's just basically a road race and an excuse for Tashlin to put in a lot of celebrities of the time. But hey, nothing wrong with that. It's still entertaining. The gags are pretty funny as well. So, what are all the references here? Well, strap in, and I'm sure my editors will love this. But Let's go through, first of all the celebrities in order as we see them. So, first celebrities we see, I mean, I should say at this point they need no introduction. You know, they're Laurel and Hardy. People have known them since for a long time. They're some of the most famous comedians, but sadly, I think these days they're being lost to time in terms of people knowing who they are, which is an absolute shame. So, I mean, there's some, I believe, in the public domain you can find on YouTube. Definitely check them out. There's even a Blu-ray that's out, and there's another Blu-ray coming out with all their songs. So, you know, keep them coming, I say. But yeah, definitely check them out. But who's more famous than Laurel and Hardy? Well, we've got Charlie Chaplin, who is probably the face, I would say, of silent comedy. He's been in so many shorts and, of course, a lot of feature films, and he, you know, wrote and directed a lot of his movies. And, you know, my personal favorites are Modern Times, but hey, you know, I quite enjoy his his filmography. And I guess again we're coming to a point where a lot of people might be, you know, forgetting who Charlie Chaplin actually is. They might see his, you know, face and silhouette, and, you know, the cane and the mustache and all that stuff, but not actually know who he is, which is an absolute shame. But again, his stuff's on YouTube, so definitely check that out. And I guess who's even more obscure, but not in cartoons, because he's parodied quite a bit, is W.C. Fields. And, you know, he was an actor and comedian, and he basically had the persona of someone who drank a lot, and he spoke in a drawl, you know, my little chickadee, you know, that kind of thing. I'm a very bad impressionist in that regard, but yes, he definitely had his persona, and the way the publicity was made out at the time was that was like his real personality, when it actually wasn't, according to letters that he had written and that were compiled together in the 70s. Now, someone I can totally understand if you're not sure who is Edna May Oliver, and she was an actress who had a unique look about her. She had a very long face, and, you know, I guess it just lent itself well to comedy, and she definitely put it to good use in that regard. I guess it's a case of, well, if I look like this, might as well use it, you know. But anyway, yeah, it was lending itself well to comedy, but her whole film career lent itself to a wide variety of genres. And yeah, she was in the film industry for about 2 decades. You know, she was in some silence and all that. But her appearance in the short appears to be a play on her appearances in the 2 Charles Dickens films she did in 1935. She did David Copperfield and A Tale of Two Cities. But I haven't actually seen those, so I'm not sure where the whoop whoop comes from. So that's where you guys come in, and if you know where that particular soundbite comes from, definitely let me know. Greta Garbo, well, again, she's been in quite a few of these shorts, and notably, they're playing up the whole thing about her wanting to be left alone, and that's just a reference here. Like, you're just seeing her shoes, she's in hiding. You know, she was notorious for wanting to be out of the spotlight. She, you know, wouldn't give autographs. She was a very private person. She had low publicity, and when she stopped acting, yeah, it was just, she just wanted to be, left alone. And I guess there was even a bit of a hobby for people, Greta Garbo spotting, when she was just going for daily walks and that in the 80s, which, you know, it is what it is. But yeah, you know, if you want to be left alone, people should just left her alone, I'd say. Well, Charles Laughton, I mean, I kind of feel for the guy, because every time Charles Laughton is referenced in these shorts, it's always him as a sailor, or, you know, based off of his film Mutiny on the Bounty. And again, even in the Future Bugs Bunny short, you'd have that particular part reference, when in fact Charles Laughton's been in quite a few films, and later on he'd be one of my favorite films of all time, Spartacus. But, you know, he definitely had a prolific career, and again, it always seems to be Mutiny on the Bounty that's referenced. But hey, you know, which is fair enough. It's a great film. If you haven't seen it, it's from 1935. It's a fantastic movie, so definitely check that one out. So we have, well, it says Borax Karloff. I guess they just wanted the pun on the car, right? But anyway, but it's a reference to Boris Karloff, and in turn, we have a reference here to the Frankenstein's monster that Boris Karloff played in the 1931 classic Frankenstein, which, again, if you haven't seen, definitely go check it out. You know, I feel like I'm giving you guys a lot of homework here, you know, for those of you who do maybe just watching the shorts and wondering what these references are. You know, I feel like a bit of a teacher here, really. But, yeah, It's kind of weird, though. I get why Tashlin did this. He needed a quote-unquote villain, even though he's supposed to be a sympathetic character. If you watch the film, you know what I mean. But I guess it's because it just looks pretty sinister. But why Boris Karloff would just put on all that makeup, which I'm sure would have been an absolute pain to do while he was filming the film? Yeah, it's a cartoon. Ta-da! Now, I mentioned an unfortunate gag. Yeah, we have Stepin Fetchit. And I actually go into more detail about Stepin Fetchit in the commentary and review for All This Rabbit Stew, which is on the channel. Definitely check that out, because the hunter in that short is basically a play on Stepin Fetchit. But just to put it simply, for those who don't really want to see a Censored 11 review, he was an African-American actor who played up the whole stereotypical lazy African-American, and he actually got quite wealthy from it too. But yeah, he was definitely seen as the face of what was wrong with African-American acting in the 30s. And, how all the stereotypes were played up, as opposed to, trying to play more, realistic roles and whatnot, as what's thankfully being done today. We're getting some proper, authentic roles for African-Americans. So we get a 3-for-1 in one shot in a British vehicle. I mean, I guess it was just a play on the whole British actor thing. But anyway, so we have, first of all, George Arliss, and he was an actor and playwright. He found great success in the US. Same with Leslie Howard. And, they would basically be box office draws playing, Englishman type roles. Leslie Howard in particular, he might be perhaps most well known for being in the 1939 film Gone with the Wind. But then again, you might watch the film and still not know who he is. But, well, that would be perhaps his most famous role. But he's been in quite a few other films as well. Definitely check him out. But interestingly, you had Freddie Bartholomew, the child actor, which, funnily enough, Tashlin would actually reuse the caricature in the upcoming The Major Light Till Dawn. And I will definitely get into that when I get up to that. But essentially, he was a child actor, and he eventually joined the fight in World War II, because obviously child actors don't remain children forever, right? And he ended up having a declining film career, and he would end up being a director and producer until his death in 1992. Now, here is interesting, and it is a little cringy, unfortunately, but I do have to mention it. All right, so we've got John Barrymore, okay? And, he was an actor, and by this point, sadly in his career, he was having declining memory. He was a heavy drinker. I mean, he was a major box office draw in the 20s, but up until this point, in 1937, he was just seen as, a washed-up, has-been actor and just struggling to remember his lines and all that. And you'll see him, he's actually pursuing Elaine Barry, and, she was known as the fourth and last wife of John Barrymore. I mean, she only had 3 roles, and they're all listed in IMDb, and not really too much is known about her except for that one detail. But this whole thing was a play on the whole tabloid sensation where John Barrymore, he was quite old. He was older at this point in his life, and he was pursuing Elaine Barry, who was quite young. She was 16. So, yeah, cringy by today's standards. That would like be being me, 38, pursuing a teenager, which that's just wrong. We know it's wrong today. You'll see that he's the Caliban and she's the Ariel, and that's what the tabloids were saying, that she was the Ariel to his Caliban. But who is Caliban? Who is Ariel? Well, I hope you studied Shakespeare, because those came from a Shakespeare play, The Tempest, so that basically references that. So I guess even tabloid reporting seemed to be a little bit more sophisticated back then, right? Even though it was wrong that they were covering such a story, which they should be pointing out, why pursuing someone so young. But anyway, it is what it is. We can't change the past. And finally, Clark Gable. Now, again, this day and age, people will just know him as the guy with the big ears in cartoons, right? He's been parodied to death. But here specifically, he's hitchhiking, and that looks to be a reference to the masterpiece of a film. And if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. Again, more homework for you guys. It Happened One Night, and that's from 1934. And there's a famous scene where he's trying to hitchhike to no avail, no one's pulling over, but then his co-star in the film, Claudette Colbert, would show off a bit of a leg, and then of course a car would stop. And it's also the movie where you see Clark Gable eating a carrot, which allegedly is the one of the bases as part of Bugs Bunny's character later on. But, I put a question mark on that, but that's where it all comes from. And I should also point out, I mentioned before the film David Copperfield, and which is based, of course, of the Charles Dickens book. It came out in 1935. Now, that actually starred W.C. Fields and Edna May Oliver, and it also had Freddie Bartholomew, and it also featured John Barrymore's brother, Lionel Barrymore. So, just an interesting thing to, I guess, tie it all together. Two other references. I know there's like a lot of references here. So, later on, we see a very blink and you miss it moment. It says WPA project. So that's a reference to the Works Progress Administration that was part of Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal when it came to employing millions of job seekers into work on public works projects, I guess like the road project here, which, again, I don't think they're actually racing on a proper racetrack. I think it's just some back roads somewhere, but you would have thought that they would have actually made sure that there were no hazards like this. But anyway, it's a cartoon. Yeah, I know. I do have to point that out. But yeah, that's what the WPA thing is referring to. And, the joke on taxes at the time, I like to go sometimes down the rabbit hole. And again, this gag appears to be another reference to the times where you got the whole New Deal, where they were trying to raise money. It was a Great Depression, of course, trying to get out of it. And I was looking up the tax rates for those in the 1936 year, and it appears that, income at the $2 million level would be taxed at a 74 to 78% percentage rate. So, of course, they're exaggerating here in this. Sure, we're going to get a couple of bucks, right? But around this time, taxes were raised significantly on high-earning individuals to, obviously, pay for things such as that WPA, How about that, People earning a lot of money actually putting where the money's actually used for good things in society? Yes, well, I won't go into politics here, but at least you know what that is referring to. And I guess it's just a funny thing now, with people who are anti-tax, they'll look at this and go, ha 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 ha. But anyway, I digress. But, all these references mean absolutely nothing if the cartoon's lousy, and thankfully it's not. I mean, if I show this to my kids, they'll just be like, all these funny-looking people just doing funny things, and they wouldn't think anything of it, They're just, featuring all these different crazy-looking characters just deciding to have a race. And I love how, the announcer says, calling all stars instead of calling all cars. I thought that was pretty clever, because was the trademark announcing thing when it came to road races, calling all cars, anyway. But I like how it opens as well. You got the whole, this is a work, it's a parody of the whole, this is a work of fiction, and any resemblance to anyone living or dead is purely coincidental. And of course, you got the "You're just an angel in disguise" playing over that. I guess there's a deep meaning there. But I guess my favorite gag in this whole thing is just the ridiculous British actor bit where it's like, oh, it's 4:00, it's time for tea. It's just, and they just start drinking the tea. It's clearly exaggeration, but it's not quite far from the truth. Where they have they're very scheduled when it comes to the folks in the UK. But hey, if you're from the UK, let me know. Do you think that's funny? Do you think that's close to home? Or is this just something that perhaps used to happen and maybe not as much anymore, where everything's, scheduled to the T? Sorry, pun there. But I think there might be an error here. And again, this is probably something that's like, hey, it's a cartoon, just enjoy it. It's just an observation. I don't care. I just noticed this. But you've got a scene where the monster goes straight ahead past a drawbridge, and it just backs up, turns into there, pushes the button to lift the bridge up. But then we see in the next shot that this was like apparently the path, when in the previous shot it wasn't. Yeah, we'll put the Simpsons thing in. So, I hope somebody got fired for that blunder. And of course, Homer say, about the whole thing, about a grown up watching, a cartoon. He's like, I respectfully retract my question. that particular scene gets me every time. So, but yeah, ultimately, as Austin mentioned, yeah, it's a gag-filled short. It's funny, puts a smile on my face, and I just love the fact that, by this point, Porky was a star, not just for the studio, but was a breakout character that proved to be pretty popular, no doubt due to the stutter, and he was just someone that was different than some of the other breakout stars of the time, like Popeye, Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, so on. In fact, this short is actually quite similar to the whole Mickey's Gala Review, where it had the same theme of, the breakout cartoons star surrounded by other, Hollywood stars at the time. That definitely was the first thing I thought of. But in terms of entertainment value, fun cartoon, 7 out of 10. Aside from one problematic element, I recommend it to just about everyone. And yeah, hopefully now that you know who these people are, you can look it up and, do your homework, as I mentioned. So that'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take care.